Welcome to the Africa Speaking Podcast. The podcast discusses critical issues about the African continent. It is brought to you by Toyeza Communications in Nairobi.
Welcome to the third installment of our four-part series. I'm your host, Maslin Nyambala. We are moving forward in our insightful conversation with Dr. Staline Kibet. We are uncovering more about how combining scientific and indigenous knowledge can create powerful solutions for climate change adaptation and build stronger communities. Let's continue our journey. We have different institutions that can play a role. Going forward, what role can schools and universities play?
School system is on to blame largely for why we are where we are right now. That the system that we've gone through in the past has not put a lot of emphasis on indigenous knowledge. So when climate change became a reality, it's now when you're realizing that we need all the sort of knowledge that you can get. Let's talk of university, for example. Universities, they have three mandates. Mandates, number one is teaching and learning. It's just, Number two is to carry out research. Number three is to do outreach. So if you see, let's talk about teaching and learning. The curriculum should deliberately start to see how they can incorporate indigenous knowledge as part of the learning. So it's up to the universities to see where they want to put it, either as an undergraduate course, as a diploma course, as a postgraduate course, or even just having it as part of the units that they teach. But what is really very important is that the universities should, as a matter of priority, emphasize the importance of indigenous knowledge. Because as a higher institution of learning, people will listen and say, if the universities are promoting it, then it must be a serious issue. And I see myself every time I start to sit down with communities and I introduce myself being a university lecturer. And I said, so you think these are very important issues in universities? I said, yes, it is. And that way, you not only change the people that goes out there to start appreciating indigenous knowledge, but other than that, it also gives you an opportunity now for people to do research on those issues. So as we are discussing about climate change, for example, and asking ourselves, what is the role of indigenous knowledge on matters climate change? So the students, as part of research, can start asking those questions. What is the role of traditional knowledge as far as adaptation is concerned, as far as mitigation is concerned, as far as resilient building is concerned? So from curriculum, the universities has a role to play. And then they also have a role in research itself, because as you do research, like for example, now what I've just talked about, this project you're building with the National Museums of Kenya. You're documenting traditional medicine. So you go to communities and they have this knowledge, a very broad knowledge on traditional medicine for managing different conditions. So research would be able now to come in and say, wait a minute, let's see how I don't like using the word to validate per se, but for not having a better word, validate the claims. In this case, if say they treat malaria or it treats respiratory disease, chest problems. So what the research will do is get these samples, specimens, take it through the analysis in the lab, phytochemical analysis first to identify the active ingredients, and then also try to do things about toxicity, because then that will inform the issues about dosage. If you're giving people for whatever disease, because some of the medicinal plants are also poisonous plants. So you want to identify and see what are the toxicity, if there is any, and then efficacy. So that even when now we move to the second level of promoting it as into production of drugs out of it, then you've gone through those initial research. So research has a play in validating those claims, and it could be in anything, even traditional foods. You've had derema, which is in the scientific world they call it Pasella alba. Derema is eaten a lot in Western Kenya, and surprisingly, you find that the community is different. The Luos and the Luyas have the same claims about giving the rema to mothers who are expectant, or they've just given birth because they increase the milk for the baby, and also the delivery becomes very stress-free, you know. And there's been a lot of work that has been done surrounding it, and actually proves that there is actually the truth in terms of milk output from the mothers. So these are the things that you follow it up with science, and the people that we know in the cities and in towns that have not had a very good, they've not lived in the villages, and you tell them some of those things, they think it's just stories. But when you do a scientific analysis, and we've done some actually, when I worked at the museum, there was some analysis done on traditional foods, and the results were so amazing. Yeah. So when you give it to people, they will believe you, and they take it seriously. So universities has a role to do the research on claims that are relating to traditional foods, traditional medicine, and any others for that matter, that they can actually be used as a way of promoting it. Because now you have scientific backing, but other than that, you can also improve on policies itself, because then you can provide what you call research-based policies. The universities can also do outreach. And in this case, for all the results that have come as a result of research, like in that case I was telling you of traditional foods, actually the way the foods now, traditional vegetables are found in supermarket was out of work which was done for the longest period, from 1989 to around 2004 at the National Museums of Kenya. And after all the things that were done, from documentation, with the indigenous knowledge associated with them, to the scientific validation, nutritional analysis, to promotions, where we actually did, I think, 3 years consecutively, where we did an exhibition where communities would come with their food and they cook in the National Museums of Kenya, and people would taste it. So by the time the food got into the supermarket, critical mass of people that already knew about what was happening. So it became very easy to move into the next step of promoting it now. So these days nobody promotes traditional foods as much, because everybody knows
everybody has adopted.
Yes, now we're going to feel like traditional medicine. There's still some people who think, no, we're not so sure about this concoction because it has not been packaged in the way that is appealing. Find some guys carrying some liquid in some containers there, which doesn't look so very encouraging. So people, even before questioning whether they are actually effective, they are more concerned about hygiene. So the research component try also to bring into the issues about packaging. You tell the people about expiry, because some guys carry things for weeks and weeks and things that have not expired and they've expired. So universities and that can contribute on that. And in the issues of outreach now, once you already have facts about certain products, you can be able to go out and say, as a university, we can actually tell you with certainty that this crop or this medicine or this thing is yes. And in other institutions of learning, like secondary and even primary, there is an opportunity right now because of the CBC sort of curriculum, because there's a lot of emphasis also on learning by doing. And this is an opportunity where kids can get involved in those things that they learn from home. You know, growing of crops, growing of trees, growing of so you see, when they start growing those things, the first thing they do is to know the name, what is it used for, why are we planting it. So there is an opportunity from that level for the kids and in schools to get involved, and those messages starts to build up. So by the time they go into the university, it is no longer a story of whether it is working or not is working. They've already been eating those traditional foods, vegetables. So it's not a stranger to them. So there is a secondary primary learning by doing. We were even proposing that if it was possible, the children in secondary schools and primary schools that are in boarding can have actually a day where they eat traditional foods, like you've been promoting traditional dress on a Friday. So they can also eat some traditional foods on one day in a week.
Traditional foods like which ones?
Like managu.
They can eat at least
tubers.
once a week.
Even tubers, you can have tubers instead of bread on some morning. You can have those ones. So those are the ones that can also they can be introduced as part of the food. So the kids already have the taste buds of some of these traditional foods. Introducing them when they're grown-up people and they just have no relation.
Maybe even pumpkin.
Yes. So the schools from universities to the primary has a role that they can play in promoting some of these things. And also, in a way, you're also building the resilience of the people. One of the resilience is having the diversity, either diversity of food, diversity of income, diversity of an ecosystems that you can, get different ecosystem services. That's what resilience is. One of the indicators of resilience.
Diversity,
What climate change tends to do is that it can destroy some livelihoods, but if you have alternatives, then you can still continue with life. And also learning itself is also very important, because in building resilience, if you know there's going to be drought because you've learned by looking at the movement of the birds or the insects, or you see some flowering or some plants, what it tells you is that, there's going to be rain in the next coming days. So you're ready to grow your crops. So that means your timing becomes very appropriate, and therefore you're more likely to have success in your crop growing than when somebody has no knowledge at all. So you're already more resilient than somebody who has no knowledge on that. So those are the areas now that the roles university do is training people to learn all this information. Other than the information itself, is also creating a critical community of practice, community of practitioners that will go and they become ambassadors and see that indigenous knowledge is also a critical knowledge that must be given its due emphasis in development. But other than that, also that you're believers in it, because if you're eating traditional foods, you're already building even a healthy community.
So maybe also, what role can businesses play in all this building resilience in communities? What role can they play?
Matter sustainability, you look at it in three areas. Issues about society, that whatever it is that you're doing must be socially just. We're talking about economic viability, must be viable so that it can be able to be sustainable. And then lastly is ecological soundness, or it must be ecologically sound. The businesses can contribute positively or negatively depending on how it's done. For those people who believe in sustainability, the three principles, then the businesses can thrive. Because if your business is socially just, is environmentally sound, is economically viable, so there are things that you do as a business to make sure that it is sustainable. There are things in Nakuru, for example, deforestation. People have been doing businesses in cutting hardwood in the Mao forest. Obviously, that was very unsustainable because, for one, they are risking the lives of the people, like the Okek, for example. So it's not socially just. The number two, it's also not environmentally sound because nobody had done any study to show what is the level of extraction that is sustainable. And therefore, it's not a business that is sustainable. So both from either the people bringing the timber or the people selling the processed timber in the town. So what then happens is that if businesses were to play their rightful role in building resilience, and then some of the things like what I mentioned about the flower farms right now, that they're already trying to do certification. So certification is that they want to follow certain good practices. That as they do their flower farming activities, they make sure that they follow those principles of socially just, environmental soundness, and also economic viability. And therefore, they do things that make sure that those concepts are followed. You don't use chemicals and anyhow. You need to be very. You have regulations on how you use the chemicals and how you dispose the chemical containers. How even the people doing the use of the chemical themselves have to be dressed in a certain manner so that there is no exposure to poison chemicals. So a business like the flower farms, by following, by being certified, then they can be able to promote livelihoods because they employ so many people that is sustainable. And another thing is that to be certified, especially on issues of social justice, they give them like a recommended wage salary as per regulations in the government. They also have to follow certain rules, of the land, of the country. By doing those things, then they're able to have a population of workers that are very happy. Their working environment is good. So they have a livelihood in terms of income. And some who have employees that are actually housed within the flower farms, for example, they are also given houses that are conducive to living. Maybe also access of their children to go to school. So a business like that can contribute to sustainability and resilience because of doing some good practices. So what business can do, any business in that case, you can look at it along that line. If you're involved in the timber industry, your question is, where is your source of timber? Is that timber from a sustainable source? So one of the things we'll be already looking at is like, for example, you have your timber yard. You would say, you know what, I don't want to stock indigenous trees because they take forever to grow. So probably, unless I can be sure that it's coming from a source that is sustainable. Another people is some of the people actually do the planting of the trees. So they have different ages of trees that they harvest this one, the other is get maturing and that kind of stuff. Other people that are doing other businesses that are nature-based, whether you're doing crops. So it follows the same thing, that the people where you get your raw materials for your industry, like even tea are also becoming also another one. Previously, the tea factories would use any firewood for energy in the factories, but now these days, they no longer use indigenous trees as a source of firewood. So they either use eucalyptus or other exotic species because they grow faster. So business has a role. Because if they continue to use indigenous trees, some people will just go harvesting indigenous trees from government forests or even community forests, and in the process, you increase vulnerability because of climate change and all that kind of things. So whichever businesses, any business that is based on natural resources has a role to play in building resilience of communities by ensuring that you're careful in terms of your value chain from the source to the end. And if you're able to take care of that, you'll be building resilience in all the value chain as well. So that's how I see it. And businesses could do the opposite. And as I told you, that there's been a lot of the destruction of the Mau forest was because of unscrupulous business people. People who didn't care much about the environment or even about the people themselves. So some of the rivers dries up. Even some businesses, farming activities like tea growing in Kericho and other places could be put in the jeopardy because if there is no more forest, then there is no tea estate.
There's no tea estate. Because
tea relies on heavy rain. So it's an area that everybody should be able to support, even if you are a small-scale farmer. We talked about the pollination. If you don't have natural environments, there's no need of planting pumpkins. Unless you're going to do what I've heard about the Chinese, you have to hire people to do pollination. You become an insect now. Just doing you carry a brush and then you brush the flowers and then that's what happens finally. Yes.
The human pollinators.
Yes.
A last resort.
Yeah, because
it's not good.
And especially so for high valued crops like vanilla, you could actually end up in that situation. And in other countries, I had a chance to visit some countries some times back, and actually people would hire bees. So I'm a beekeeper, and then you're the sunflower farmer. So you only need to tell me how many acres you have. Then I'll calculate the amount of beehives that I'll bring to your farms to stay for 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
And then you write from your check.
Oh.
Yes, so that's what is happening right now in some places, and I saw that one in the US.
In other countries.
Yes. So if we do nothing, also that if you do businesses that are not, you have these plantations of wheat or plantations of barley or plantation or whatever other things, without due regards about those things, you
Without
may
pollinators nearby.
you may end up actually having, when you're doing your budget, you have some money for plowing the farm.
Yeah.
You have your budget for buying the seeds, the fertilizers, and money for the pollinators. Because if you don't take care of those, so sometimes people may not see the whole chain of the. So you just in the end of it, you say, oh, you're buying a lianto in the supermarket, but you've not known what has happened before
along the
value chain. Inside that, at the end, there is some cost for bees, which is never added. Yeah.
Have you seen any gender issues in building resilience?
Yeah, one of the things we really see very evidently that women tends to be affected disproportionately on the assets of climate change, and this one comes as a result of the role women play. The gender roles that they play. Women do take care of the families, they cook the food, they go looking for water and firewood, and even some are already involved in some businesses that are largely natural based. So some of them, because of the cultural reasons, access to some of the resources, access to decision making may be a challenge. When you talk about climate change and we choose gender, you can look at it from that angle. So there's some women sort of affected more than men. Let's give examples from the pastoral communities.
Yeah.
When the drought strikes, and then the normal thing they do is migration. So they'll migrate the livestock, sometimes even up to 100 kilometers away from home. And what they do is all the animals that are sick, all the animals that are weak are left behind. And it's the women that takes care of them. And this is an additional work to other jobs that they're already doing of taking care of the elderly and the children at home. So what the women does then is that they make sure that those animals survive. So women would go to look for water for these animals from very far places. They look for some pastures, including some really things that people in other places may not believe it is happening, like going and getting the nest of some birds. You know, there's these birds that are like weaver birds. They build a lot of nest on a tree. So they'll actually go and remove the nest of the birds
and bring it
to give
pasture,
as pasture,
as feed.
To feed the animals. So that's an additional work women would do other than what they've already been doing it. So it's already that because it is of drought, the water is very far and that kind of stuff. And then the other thing is that sometimes now, because the animals have been taken very far away, so you need to get now supplements for milk or other things. So other than the firewood and fodder, the water, there's now the addition of fodder for the livestock and that kind of stuff. So that is making it really very difficult for women. The other issues is, of course, some access to land or inputs for production. So because of the cultural issues also, you see that some women may not have really those opportunities that are available for men, for example. And that way, that disadvantages them. So even the issue of selecting the seeds and keeping the seeds, so all those things that you talked about earlier about cultural conservation is, if you look at it, a lot of the women are the ones keeping those seeds that have survived. They are disadvantaged, but they are also they have opportunities to actually do something. So now I think this is now where we're thinking that if you're going to do any climate action or climate intervention, having a conversation around the gender issues becomes very critical, so that you see the strengths that have been brought from every. First of all, see the vulnerabilities of different gender, and also the opportunities that different genders also can bring on the table to help in that situation. And all these things, you're calling it drought-resistant crops. If you go across the country in Kenya, you might actually realize that it is a lot the custodians are the women. So we could take advantage of some of those things and build resilience around it, and then give them areas that are barriers to women even being more fruitful in building resilience, and adaptation on communities can be addressed so that they are made enabled, or they are enabled to be able to even optimize those. So gender issues are there.
Okay.
And these in terms of how they are affected, and also what they can do in terms of
and what they can do.
So you just need to look at each individual communities and their issues, and how we can build around those issues.
Yeah. That concludes the third part of our series with Dr. Staline Kibet. Join me, Maslin Nyambala, for the final episode next time as we bring it all together.
Thank you for listening to the Africa Speaking Podcast. Join us in our next episode, brought to you by Toyeza Communications in partnership with Forum Sieve. For any comments and views, you can reach us through our website, www.africaspeaking.org. You can also reach us on Facebook, Toyeza Communications, or on our X handle, @ToyezaComs. You can also write to us on email, info@africaspeaking.org.